All right, so for this video, we are going to do Richard Ramirez. Now, before I start, I want to rate these other two felons, I guess you can say, or serial killers. And yeah, so let's start off with Jeffrey Dahmer. So his overall rating is a 6.6. How rare is that? That is 1 in 26.6 people, and that puts him at the top 4 percentile. And then the next person is Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy's overall rating is a 6. How rare is that? That is 1 in 5.66 people, and that will put him at the top 18th percentile. Alright, so Richard Ramirez's overall rating is a 7.2. How rare is that? That is 1 in 210 people, and that puts him at the top 0.5 percentile. His side facial score is 57%. His front facial score is 64%. His total facial harmony score is 61%. His facial dimorphism is a 5.5. His body fat factors is a 9.5. And his miscellaneous features is an 8.5. We got the tier list to the right side. Tier 1 is ideal. Tier 2 is near ideal. Tier 3 is normal. Tier 4 is a slight flaw. Tier 5 is a flaw. Tier 6 is a huge flaw. And Tier 7 breaks harmony. The overall facial assessment breakdown. So let's start off with the right side, which is his best features, and then from there we're gonna go to the worst. So his best features are his facial leanness, full thick hair, deep set eyes, perfect lip protrusion and alignment, compact mid face, and upturned eyes. His worst features are low set cheekbones, jaw recession, nose lack forward growth, overbite, short ramus length overall, and jaw size is too short for his face. The rarity scores of other celebrities, so this is a mix between males and females. Alright, so let's start off with the facial dimorphism is worth 20% of the overall score. Since he's a male, that's what we're going to be looking at. And I'm going to tell y'all guys what I put a check on for him. So I gave him a check for canthal tilt, eyebrow settiness, dominant lower third, eyebrow brow ridge inclination, gonial angle, and nasal frontal angle. His body fat factors, he pretty much scores 100 on that. His miscellaneous features worth 15% of the overall score. I gave him a check on tear troughs, so he does have a bit of eye bags, and nasolabial folds, so he does have some folds around the nose area. Alright, so the first measurement of today is the eye separation ratio, and he does get a tier 1 for this, and his eyes are perfectly separated apart, and it goes from the pupil distance relative to the width of his head. His facial thirds is not evenly distributed. It's kind of close to it, but it's 1 degree off, and his lower third is a little bit too dominant. His canthal tilt is a tier 1 at 7 degrees, so he does have very upturned eyes, makes him look very youthful, and makes the eyes striking. His facial width to height ratio, so how far separated are his features of his face, and his is at a tier 1 at 1.94, so he does have a compact mid face, or a facial compactness is very compact. So yeah, so it goes from the tip of his upper lip all the way to the bottom of his eyebrows, and that's how you can measure to see how compact a person's facial features are. His jaw frontal angle is a tier 4 at 78 degrees. Now this is going to be on the thinner side, but this isn't too thin to where it's a complete flaw. It's still a slight flaw, but it's not that bad. It's not too it doesn't drift too far off of the ideal range at all. But preferably you want to have a jaw angle that's around a 4 at least. His cheekbone height settiness is a tier 6 at 58%. So that middle line that you see is where the peak of his cheekbones are at, or his zygomatic width. So that's the widest portion of his face, and it doesn't really go any further up. So it makes his face kind of look a little bit less youthful, I guess you can say, and less striking. Usually when you have higher set cheekbones, it just gives it a more of a youthful and striking appearance, and it makes your cheekbones have that Taylor Dove hollow S looking type of appearance to it. His total facial height to width ratio is a tier 1 at 1.36. So he actually does have a shorter head. Now this is gonna be within the ideal range, but this was kind of weird because I actually thought by looking at the pictures that he does have a long head, and in some of the pictures it does look like he does have a shorter head. But this right here clearly indicates that his head is not long at all, that he does have a perfect size head for a male face. And so that one kind of surprised me a bit. His bigonial width, so how wide is his jaw? And his is at 86%. So anything less than 85 for a male is going to get you outside of that ideal range. But his jaw is wide enough. Even though the jaw angle isn't wide, his jaw in general, or where the tip of the mastoid muscles are at, is wide enough for his overall facial structure. His chin to philtrum ratio is a tier 1 at 2.3, and 2.3 is perfectly fine. So he does have somewhat of a medium-sized philtrum, and then his chin isn't too long or too short as well. So I can kind of see how these two kind of harmonize well together. His neck width ratio is a tier 2 at 88%. So he does have somewhat of a wider set neck, but is not wide enough to where he can get the full points for it. His mouth to nose width ratio is a tier 4 at 1.29. So what this indicates to me is that his mouth, believe it or not, is not really his nose, because the nose are still within the inner iris or the inner creases of his eyes, but the mouth itself isn't wide enough. So if he did have a bit of a wider mouth, the nose and mouth would harmonize well with each other, and it will also harmonize well with his eyes, and that will kind of give it like a little bit of a bonus to it. His mid-face ratio is evenly distributed at a tier 1, and it is at a 1, so he does have somewhat of a compact mid-face, and you want that mid-face to look more like a square, which it does look like a square. Obviously, y'all can see that. And is a distance between the pupils, and that is going to be divided by the distance between the upper lip all the way to the eye line, and that's how you can tell if you have a proper mid-face ratio. So you want that to be pretty much even with each other. His eyebrow settiness is a tier 1 at 0.5. 0.5 is very, very low set eyebrows, and most people can't even pass this measurement for whatever the reason is. And for him to have eyebrows that are extremely low set makes him have a more masculinized appearance and makes him have a dominant appearance in general. So so he does have very, very low set eyebrows. His eye separation ratio, and this is going to be the one eye test, or one width eyes apart, and his is at 0.97. Now it was kind of tricky to get this measurement right here, because both eyes are actually not the same length. I think it's because of the way the picture is taken, so I had to get the averages. But so he does pass this measurement, and they are perfectly spaced out apart. His eye aspect ratio is 2.5, so his eyes are actually a little bit too rounded. Now, it might not seem like that in other pictures, but I like getting pictures that, they're not expecting it, because some people tend to kind of bend their head and look very straight to the camera, and they'll squint their eyes. But with this one, this is just like an everyday thing. And I know in this picture he looks kind of like surprised or whatnot, but you can tell that his face is actually relaxed, because you can really tell if somebody is doing some sort of facial expressions with their eyebrows. That's usually the main way you can tell. And he is not doing that at all. Like, this is just a normal regular picture, so that's why I picked this one. But anyway, I don't want to get on a big rant or anything like that. His eye aspect ratio is on the higher end, and he does have very rounder eyes. His lower lip to upper lip ratio is a tier 1 at 1.45, and this is going to be a tier 1. And so his bottom lip is full, his upper lip is full but not too full, and it does have a great balance between each other. His deviation from his ipsilateral angle to a jaw frontal angle is 16 degrees. This is going to be a slight flaw, and at least you want it to be at least 5 degrees preferably, and no more than 15 degrees. preferably as well, or that will put you at the flaw range. And this is stemmed to his jaw angle being too narrow, and we're gonna see why his jaw angle is narrow. But excuse me, we're gonna see exactly why his jaw angle is very narrow by looking at the side view profile. Like I always say again, the side view profile does affect your front view all the time. So when we look at the side view profile, it's gonna give us an idea why he does have a narrow jaw, since that is one of his main flaws that he does get points deducted on. His eyebrows tilt is 19 degrees, so this is going to make him actually look kind of like a villain. Just by looking at him, he does kind of look like a villain, and you don't want to have eyebrows that are too turned up, and it's just not natural, especially for a male. Like, it's just going to it's going to look scary looking. You don't want to have eyebrows that are that upturned. His bitemporal width, and another thing too, I know y'all see like his eyebrows flare out kind of like that. That is not ideal. I don't know why his eyebrows flare out kind of like that. That's kind of weird. But usually you don't see that in male faces at all. His bitemporal width is a tier 2, so this is going from the temple regions of his forehead, and it's pretty much I just consider the how much forehead exposure you have, and this kind of gives the shape of the head. So from the bigonial width all the way to the middle of your head, all the way to the bitemporal width. So the bizygomatic width relative to the bitemporal width, and that is also relative to the bigonial width, and that right there will shape how your head will look. And he does have somewhat of a decent shaped head, not the perfect shaped head, but his is at 97%. And 97% is going to leave him at a tier 2. So that's just a little bit too much forehead exposure, believe it or not. So that's why when you look at him, he does kind of have a light bulb appearance a little bit with the head shape, just a little bit, not too much. But your head shape does matter. And also your head length does matter as well. So the width to height as well can play a part in that. His lower third proportions is 34%. 34% means that he does have a well-proportioned lower third of his face, and his upper portion is very greatly spaced apart, so it doesn't deviate too far. His ipsilateral aliar angle, so that's the middle measurement of his face, and that is going to be 94 degrees. So the mid angle of his face goes from the subnasal all the way to the outer edges of his eyes, and 94 degrees is going to be a tier 1. So what this indicates to me is that he doesn't have very large or wide eye orbits, I guess you could say. So his eye orbits are not too wide, so he does have somewhat of narrower eyes, or closer set eyes relative to his overall face. So his eyes are not too spaced out far from each other. All right, so it was kind of hard to get the perfect side view profile of him, I'm not gonna lie. So this is the best one I can use, and it was kind of hard to see where his earlobe is. If I knew where his earlobe is, it would be a little bit easier to see where his the reference line will be for his Frankfurt plane angle, but this is the best I can do. And I kind of can see a little bit of the area, but I can't see where the earlobe starts at. So I just kind of give it a little bit of a good guess, but I can still see his gonial angle in majority of his facial measurements. So that's all I need, or his facial features, I mean. So that's all I need for for the side view profile. So let's start off with the first one, which is the gonial angle. He gets a tier 1 for this at 121 degrees. So this means that he does have a very sharp gonial angle, and his side view profile was kind of a bit different in my opinion, but y'all gonna see what I mean later. His nasofrontal angle is 124 degrees, so he does have a protrusive brow region, and this is very masculinizing. His mandibular plane angle is a tier 4 at 34 degrees, so he does have a mandible that is extremely downswung. So the Frankfurt plane angle is this line that right here, and this is 0 degrees. Remember that, 0 degrees. So this is flat to the ground, and I bring this Frankfurt plane angle down here, which is flat to the ground, and you see this bottom inclination that's going all the way down. This is where his mandible is, and 34 degrees is extremely downswung. So this will affect the front profile. And what I mean the front profile is, y'all know exactly what I mean. The frontal jaw angle. So the front jaw angle is going to be affected because his mandibular plane angle is downswung. So like I said again, your side view measurements can also affect your front view measurements as well. So make sure to remember that. His ramus to mandible ratio is a tier 6, so he does have an extremely short ramus. So that blue line is his ramus, and the red line, which is where the mandible is and where the mandible starts and ends, that is what is being divided by. And I got 0.35, so that means that he does have a very short ramus. So the ramus is 35% of the mandible. And to give you a perspective, it needs to be at least 60%. So he's not even close to that. So that's how short his ramus really is. His facial convexity from the glabella is 173 degrees. So 173 degrees means that he does have a perfectly rounded facial convexity. So there's nothing wrong with that. And it goes from the chin to the subnasal all the way to the glabella. His submental cervical angle is 108 degrees, so he doesn't really have any submental fat underneath the chin or any loose skin underneath that chin, and he doesn't really have he does have a bit of a low hyoid just by looking at it, but I mean it's not too low to where it changes that angle, but it's at the higher end of it. So if this was past 110, then he wouldn't get full points for it, but nevertheless, this is perfectly within the ideal range anyway, so he will get full points for it. But I'm just saying that if the bone protrudes any more far past that, then maybe not. But anyway, next one. His nasophacial angle is a tier 3 at 29 degrees, and 29 degrees is ever so slightly off, but he'll still get a tier 3 because that's under, not over. And so this is probably due to his nose not being protrusive enough. And this also, I'm not going to spoil it yet, but also he does have jaw recession, like I said, as well. So that also ties into it as well. So he does have a lot of recession in his face overall because he doesn't have enough forward growth in two particular areas. His nasolabial angle is 106 degrees, and this is going to be a tier 1. So even though he doesn't have the best nose shape, he does have an upturned nose. So yeah, this tells me that his nose is very upturned. His orbital vector is positive, so he does have deep set eyes, as you can clearly see, and you can see it from the front that his eyes are very deep set. And what also helps it as well is that he does have a higher set, extremely high set nasal bridge, and I know y'all can kind of see the distance between his eyes and the nasal bridge. So he has deep set eyes with a higher set nasal bridge, and he also has a brow region too. So that kind of ties into everything that comes with having, I guess you can say, hunter eyes or very deep set X tier eyes, I guess you can say, model tier eyes, whatever they want to call it. His total facial convexity is a tier 1 at 146 degrees. So he does have a great total facial convexity, and it's very rounded. It's not too rounded or anything like that. It's not too flat. It's within the middle. So yeah, so that is perfect. His mental labial angle is 99, and this is probably due to his chin. He does have a very protrusive chin, even though he doesn't have the most longest mandibular or mandible, I guess you could say, but his chin is just very forwardly protruding, so that kind of contributes to him having a tier 4 for his mental labial angle. And his lower lip, it seems like, I mean, it's not too protrusive or too retrusive. It's kind of like in the middle, but I think it's because of his chin doing majority of the work. His facial convexity from the nasion is 169 degrees. 169 degrees is perfectly fine. So his facial convexity overall is excellent. You know, most people can't even, get a perfect facial convexity overall. So the fact that he has that is gonna set him apart from the rest. His nasal projection is a tier 4 at 0.30. And what this means is that he does have an extremely stubby nose, so he does not have any real true fourth growth. And this is probably due to his nasal bridge being set very high. So like I said before, there's also good things and bad things when it comes to having a higher set nasal bridge. So if you do have a higher set nasal bridge, right, that means that you need a more longer nose in protrusion. So if you have a higher set nasal bridge, to compensate for that, you need a nose that is extremely long. So his nose actually needs to be somewhere like right here, believe it or not, in order to harmonize with his nasal bridge, so it can have a very harmonized look to it, to where it's balanced. But he does not have that because his nasal bridge is extremely high. And this is one of the highest I've seen. I know y'all can see that blue line that's going all the way across. This is how I normally do it. And that just to give you an idea of how high his nasal bridge is relative to the width of his nose. And that's going to be a flaw. His nasal width to height projection is 0.83. So even though he doesn't have the most protrusion for his nose, what he does have is he does have a lengthy nose in terms of the height of it. So yeah, he does have a very lengthy nose, and you can also tell from the ipsilateral angle. So your nose length, your nose length can affect your mid-face angle. So the ipsilateral angle, because the more lengthy your nose is, the less wide that angle is going to be. And most people typically have angles that are going to be over 100, and his is actually around, I believe, 95 or 94 or something like that. So so having a longer nose will help overall. His rictus elan, so these are the lip measurements. I believe he did well on all his lip measurements, if I remember. But let's start off with the elan. So it goes from the tip of the nose down to the chin, and his bottom lip is actually closer to the line than his upper lip, so that is going to leave him at a tier 1. His H line goes from the tip of his upper lip down to his chin, and his bottom lip touches that line. It doesn't go past or anything like that, so he does get a tier 1 for that. His S line goes from the tip of the inner nostril of his nose down to the chin, and his upper lip and bottom lip touches, so that's why I put a blue right there, and he does get full points for that. And then the bursal line goes from the subnasal down to the chin, and his upper lip is more protrusive than his bottom lip, and it does go past the line for both lips as well, so he does get a tier 1 for this. This is probably one of the best lip measurements I've seen, other than I think Prince Harry's wife. I think her name is Megan. She does have perfect lip prominence as well, but his is probably second to hers in my honest opinion, if you would have passed the Z angle, which I'm about to show later on. His nasal mental angle is a tier 5 at 136 degrees. So 136 degrees is way off. So what this means is that it's too flat. And this is due to his chin being very protrusive, his nose not being protrusive, and also him having a higher set nasal bridge. So like I said, if he had a lower set nasal bridge, right? More protrusive nose, and then his chin was less protrusive, or even we can even say like let's just keep his chin just like this. If he just had a more protrusive nose, what it would do is it will force that angle to come up, and it will make the angle more acute, and then a less protrusive nasal bridge, and it would just force that angle to be more closer to 132 degrees, which would have been within the ideal range. So your nose is a huge part of your side view profile. Some people might not think that, but that is the honest truth of it. His gonian to mouth relationship is actually his gonian bone is actually above his mouth line. So this is, I think, probably like the second time I've seen something like this, other than rating Ochapo's wife. I think Ochapo's wife had the same issue as well, to where her gonian bone. So the gonian bone is where the two vectors meet between the ramus and the mandible, and it's that the bony part, or the bony edge, to where the two vectors meet, I guess you could say. And what let me see if I can show y'all guys. So this is where his gonian bone is, and this is where his lip line is, obviously. And you want your gonian bone to be below your lip line to see, and this is the best way to assess if you have an adequate sized jaw for his face. And it's pretty much where the mandible starts. But where his mandible starts is actually above his lip, and you don't want your mandible to start above your lip. You want it to start below your lip, and that's why we say if you have a proper jaw for your face, in which he does not have that. So that's why I put it as one of his negatives for his overall face. The recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, I said that he is extremely recessed. There's no reason for your chin to be near your eye. And this blue line right here, let me see if I can get the mouse. This blue line right here, his chin is literally aligned with his eyes. And you want your chin to be past your nasion and preferably past your glabella. And look how far that is. Look how far the recession is between the nasion and between the glabella. So this is going to be an extreme recession, an extreme jaw recession, and he would not get full points for this at all. His browish inclination is 22 degrees. That will be a tier 1. Now, I know it's kind of hard to see, but I can see the trajectory of his forehead inclination. So 22 degrees is at the higher end of it, but he still will get full points for it because, you know, it's less than 23. So yeah. His nasal tip angle is at a tier 2 at 107. So his nose is actually a bit pointy. So let me just go back real quick. So it might not seem that way, but his nose is actually kind of a bit angular. It may be because of, you know, the black and white image, but if you look closely, his nose is actually somewhat angular. So he doesn't get full points for the nasal tip, but it's not bad at all. So he'll still get half of the points, but usually you want somewhat of a not too pointy, but not too rounded nasal tip. So yeah. His lower lip to submental plane angle is 96 degrees, and majority of the work that's being done, because 95 is the ideal perfect range. Now, the ranges is usually between 90 to 110, but the golden range is 95. Now, this is 96. Now, I will say it's because obviously his lower lip and chin doesn't have a good relationship. Now, he does have a slightly tad bit loose skin underneath the chin, but not too much to where it's gonna, you know, make that angle a little bit obtuse or anything like that. But this is a very, very tight angle. And by looking at this angle, I can tell that the chin is doing a lot of the work, obviously, but the lips isn't as protrusive as it may look, I guess you could say. The inferior third of his face / lower third of his facial proportions. So this is another way to assess your lower third proportions of your face. And it takes the top portion of it, right? And it divides it by the lower portion of it. So the other one of the 1/3, the lower portion of the 1/3 from the first front view measurements that I was doing before, it assesses the whole lower third divided by the top third. But this one takes the top third and divided by just only this lower third right here. And I got 0.53. So that is going to be at the end of it, of the ratio for the ideal measurement. So this one is a little bit more rigorous, I guess you could say, but he still passes this one. So his lower third isn't really bad at all. And yeah. And then this is the last one, or the second to last. This is the S2 line, and or some people call it the Schussner line. And his is at 44%. So what this will indicate to us is that he does have a class 2 malocclusion, or a class 2 skeletal malocclusion. And this will indicate that he does have an overbite. And if you have an overbite, it will mean that you have that you do not have proper teeth alignment. And yeah, so he doesn't have he's not gonna have really like the best smile, and this can affect how your facial dental appearance is. And yeah, so the upper portion of his teeth is going to be way ahead of the lower portion of his teeth. And yeah, and you can also fix this with braces, so it's not anything major. His Z angle, so this is the last one finally. is at 70 degrees, and 70 degrees pretty much indicates to us that he does have more of a protrusive lips, but it's still within the normal range. So as long as you can get within the normal range, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to get within that small little ideal range, which is 75 to 78 degrees, because I don't think most people can do that. But at least if you can get within the normal range, that's perfectly fine. So what this assesses is that he does have a proper lip protrusion for his face overall, and you can assess that from looking at it from the side view profile. From the front view profile, it can be a little bit tricky, but from the side view profile is the best way to assess if you have proper lip proportions for your face. And another thing is, just because you have proper lip proportions for your face does not mean that you will do good on the other lip measurements. So I want to make that clear. So just because you have proper lip proportions for your face doesn't mean you have good lip alignment. Let me just say that. So yeah. If you want me to rate your face, make sure to DM me. My DMs are open, and just send me some pictures of your face if you want to get your face rated. And between 24 to 48 hours, I'll send you your rating. And make sure to like, subscribe, and just comment down what you want to see next. And I'm out, guys. Peace.